Week 6 of the fantasy football season. Here's tight end start sits every matchup. This week, Thursday Night Football, San Francisco 49er, the Seattle Seahawks. George Kittle, he's been back in the lineup in 2 weeks in a row. He's found the end zone since returning after missing one game. So this Niner team, it was a bad loss last week, no doubt about it, up 23-13 and couldn't hold on. But George Kittle, he's been holding up his end. Like I said, finding the end zone 2 weeks in a row, 7 for 64 and a touch. And this week at Seattle, a defense that looks like they can't stop anyone. He's a start this week. Noah Fant to sit. Just not enough volume, not enough targets. When you got DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, you're going to be on the outside looking in for targets and making an impact. So Fant to sit this week. Jacksonville Jaguars at the Chicago Bears in the London ball game. Evan Ingram's optimistic, and head coach Doug Peterson is optimistic that Evan Ingram could return to the lineup, this Jacksonville Jaguar team. But we got to see what Evan Ingram could do. He's been out since week 1 with the hamstring injury, where he only had 1 catch for 5 yards in that game. So this week with a tough matchup, and we don't know if he's going to be 100% at all as Ingram. He's a borderline option. Cole Kmet is a star. Cole Kmet, I think he's been decent so far this season. We know he had the breakout game in week 3 in Indianapolis, 10 catches, 97 yards, and a touchdown. And last week, it wasn't a great game for Cole Kmet, but still a serviceable tight end at one of the weakest positions we've seen in a long time at the position. So Cole Kmet, big target, can make plays. Gerald Everett, not really seeing any snaps anymore. And this week, I think Cole Kmet could go out there once again and be serviceable for fantasy owners. Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the New Orleans Saints. Cade Otton last week, 3 catches, 44 yards. He's a big target in the red zone. Has decent hands at the tight end position. But when you're playing behind Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, guys who can get more than 50% of the targets in the offense, it's hard to be consistent week in and week out. So this week in a matchup in New Orleans, where they got a solid defense, leave Cade Otton's nothing more than a borderline option. He'll most likely crack the top 15 this week in rankings, but in terms of going out there, having a lot of confidence in him, I just don't see it. To the Saints, Taysom Hill, you don't know what the game script's going to be with him. One big week this season is Taysom Hill. With the rest, it's been mediocre and non-existent. And he's banged up as well with the rib and chest injury on and off this season. And Juwan Johnson, he had a touchdown in week 1, but besides that, really haven't seen much from him. See, he's a sit this week. Arizona Cardinals at the Green Bay Packers. Trey McBride, he's definitely not putting up the elite numbers like he was last season for this Cardinal team, but still going out there and putting up decent numbers at the tight end position. And even with mid numbers, he's a top 5 tight end still in points per game. Is Trey McBride. We know he missed a game a few weeks ago with a concussion. Maybe he's not 100%. And last week came back and he looked pretty decent in that ball game at San Francisco. So this week in Green Bay, we'll see if McBride could go out there once again. Tucker Kraft, last week a monster performance, 4 catches, 88 yards and 2 touchdowns at the Los Angeles Rams. And Tucker Kraft, the last 2 weeks, he's found the end zone 3 times for this Green Bay Packer team. And last season, he came on strong as well towards the end of the year. So him and Jordan Love have been locked in. And ever since Love's been back in the lineup, Tucker Kraft's been one of the best tight ends in the last couple weeks. Indianapolis Colts at the Tennessee Titans. Kyle Granson, really haven't seen much out of him this season. And Mo Alley-Cox did find the end zone last week, but we've seen this a lot where Mo Alley-Cox has a touchdown here and there. People go out to the wire, pick him up. He don't do much for a few weeks, and then he'll do that all over again. So the tight end position, even going back to Phillip Rivers and Matt Ryan where they were there for this Indianapolis Colts team, the offense just doesn't target these players, and they don't make an impact week in and week out in terms of catching the football, where they're more pass blockers in Indianapolis. Now to the Titans, Chigga Kwangwo, we haven't seen much out of him this season. He's not going to be a fantasy option. He's a sit, and pretty much this whole offense in the passing game has been non-existent for the most part. Cleveland Browns at the Philadelphia Eagles, Jordan Akins, it looks like he's going to be the starter in this one. David Njoku left the game last week early at the Washington Commanders, and Jordan Akins, he had a touchdown but only 22 yards, and that touchdown was garbage time where they were down multiple touchdowns with this Cleveland Brown team. So Akins at Philadelphia, maybe he'll get some garbage time once again, but definitely not someone I would value or even have on my roster to start this week. Dallas Goedert to start. The numbers are going to go down for Dallas Goedert with A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith most likely returning to the lineup. But Dallas Goedert, he filled in as the number 1 target pretty well, I thought, for those 2 weeks when those big playmakers were out. But Dallas Goedert still a serviceable tight end. Like I said, it doesn't take much to be a decent top 12 tight end this season. If you're getting 7-8 fantasy points per game, that's good enough at the position. So Goedert, a start. Houston Texans at the New England Patriots. Dalton Schultz, we just haven't seen enough consistency. I know Nico Collins might miss this ball game now that he's week to week with the hamstring injury, and the volume and targets will go up for Dalton Schultz. But I have to see it to actually be confident I could put him out there in the starting lineup without Nico Collins in the lineup. So Dalton Schultz, no doubt about it, he played great last season with Houston. And going back 2 years ago, a great year with the Dallas Cowboys. But like I said, he's been the fourth or fifth option all season in this offense. And even with Nico Collins out, I still don't believe he's going to get targeted a whole lot. Hunter Henry is sitting this one. This offense, you can't trust anyone pretty much besides Ramondre Stevenson and Antonio Gibson. Henry last week, another quiet game. 2 catches, 32 yards. We'll see if Drake May or Jacoby Brissett, it's going to be in this one. But I believe it's not going to make a difference, even though I always say it, young quarterback security blanket and someone they rely on is the tight end position. Washington Commanders at the Ravens. Zach Ertz, it's been a decent run for Ertz, but now the last couple weeks the numbers have dropped off. Much the only person in the passing game that's up numbers for fantasy owners is Terry McLaurin. No one else in the passing game has been good for this Commander team besides Austin Eckler out of the backfield. But in terms of wide receiver or tight end position, it's been up and down. So Zach Ertz this week in a matchup at the Baltimore Ravens, I don't see him doing much coming off a 3-point game in PPR leagues. He's a sit. Mark Andrews finally had a good game, but let's remember he didn't do anything in the first half. Mark Andrews had a goose egg, and then in the second half where they were playing real catch-up and having to throw the football pretty much the rest of the ball game, Mark Andrews finished with 9.50 fantasy points in that one versus Cincinnati Bengals. But I still believe the ceiling isn't that high for Mark Andrews. Zay Flower, obviously the number one option in the passing game. And then the 2 and 3 options, if you're not passing, it's Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson running the football. So Andrews, low ceiling, good matchup, no doubt, but borderline. Isaiah Likely, same thing. Last week, 3 catches, 13 yards, 2 touchdowns. Obviously, that's fluky. Where 3 catches, only the 13 yards, and 2 of them for touchdowns. It's not going to happen once again. And I think they're going to run the football effectively in this one. Is this Baltimore Raven team, and I believe they're going to get up early in this one. And the Commanders are going to have to play some catch up. So the way the game script's going to go, I believe these 2 tight ends will have minimal impact in this one. Los Angeles Chargers at the Broncos. Tight end position for both teams hasn't done anything this season. So Hayden Hurst, Will Disley, they've been in a split for the most part for this Los Angeles Charger team. But this offense, like I said, they haven't moved the football great all season. This is a tough matchup versus one of the better defenses in the league. And both these tight ends, easy sits. Adam Troutman, Greg Dulcich, both sits. Dulcich wasn't even active in last week's game. And I thought Dulcich, he could have a breakout season with Bo Nix. But this offense is running the football and a lot of short dump-offs, and Cortland Sutton and Josh Reynolds for the most part, the only 2 guys in the receiving game that are doing anything. So Troutman, Dulcich pretty much not owned in any fantasy leagues, and for a reason, they're both sits. Pittsburgh Steelers at the Las Vegas Raiders. Pat Freiermuth, it was a quiet first half last week, but then finishing up 3 catches, 22 yards, and a touchdown. So Dallas Cowboys. So Freiermuth, him and Justin Fields have a good rapport. We saw last season Fields and Cole Kmet had a great rapport with the Chicago Bears, and I believe once again Freiermuth in a great matchup at a weak Las Vegas Raider defense could go out there and have another good game. Brock Bowers a start, one of the best tight ends in the league already. And I've said this a lot, but I'll say it again. He's been one of the more highly anticipated tight ends to come out of college in the last decade is Bowers. And we saw the athleticism. We saw the yard after catch ability last week where he had a jump ball, caught it, came down with it, and then took it to the house for another 30 yards after catch for a total of 57-yard touchdown finishing last week at Denver with 8 catches, 97 yards, and a touchdown. So Aiden O'Connell possibly could start in this ball game for the Las Vegas Raiders, where we know a young quarterback would always like to target the tight end. For Brock Bowers, he's a matchup problem. I know it's a tougher matchup versus Steelers, but like I said, safeties, linebackers, it doesn't matter who you throw his way. He's going to find ways to get open and make plays. And the Falcons at the Carolina Panthers, Kyle Pitts, he finally had a nice ball game. His second good game of the year for Kyle Pitts, 7 catches, 88 yards in that shootout, and a big performance by Kirk Cousins versus Tampa Bay Bucks. So this week at the Carolina Panthers, their defense has stopped no one this season. Cole Kmet had a decent game last week versus Panther defense. And Kyle Pitts, I've said it a lot, he's an athlete, can line up on the inside in the slot, can line up in the seam, can line up on the outside as a receiver. And Kirk Cousins, he's finally looking comfortable, and this offense is starting to get rolling. So Pitts, I think this week takes advantage as well of a great matchup and does well. Tommy Tremble, Jatavian Sanders, haven't seen much out of them at all this season. They're easy sits. I know it's not a horrible matchup versus the Falcons, but this passing game is pretty much Deontay Johnson, Chuba Hubbard out of the backfield, and Xavier Legette, if he's healthy, it's going to be where these tight ends being the fourth or fifth options. Detroit Lions at the Dallas Cowboys. Sam Laporta is a start. Obviously, he was the first, second tight end off the board in most fantasy leagues, but his numbers are definitely down. But that Monday night game, he looked pretty good in that one with Sam Laporta, and he wasn't even 100% with the ankle sprain. So coming off of that game with the ankle sprain, then the bye week last week, he should be almost 100% healthy as Laporta, and it's a great matchup at the Cowboys where they're banged up, and I don't know if Micah Parsons is going to play in this one as well. So this could be a shootout, no doubt about it, in Dallas. And Sam Laporta a start, Jake Ferguson a start, the number 2 target in this offense in the passing game behind CeeDee Lamb. And once again, last week, 6 catches, 70 yards. Great ball game for Jake Ferguson. Under the radar, underrated tight end, I believe, in fantasy football. And the way it's been this season, Jake Ferguson's been a top 7, top 8 tight end all season long. Sunday Night Football, Cincinnati Bengals at the New York Giants. Mike Gesicki had some flashes early in the season. Now he's come back down to earth a little bit, where it's all been Jamar Chase, T. Higgins in the offense, and Chase Brown catching some passes out of the backfield. And Eric Gall, he showed some flashes, but not someone I'm going to have confidence in my starting lineup. So they're both sits. Theo Johnson found the end zone last week. But if Malik Neighbors comes back, he's going to get tons of target share and a main focal point. Him and Wan'Dale Robinson in the offense. Johnson a sit. And then the final game of the week, Monday night, Buffalo Bills at the New York Jets. Dalton Kincaid a start for me. Kincaid, he's been up and down this season, but believe it or not, he's been one of the more consistent tight ends in fantasy football is Dalton Kincaid. That's just how bad the position's been. And he's the number 2 target in the offense behind Khalil Shakir. So if Shakir returns in this ball game, I think Dalton Kincaid could go out there, have a good performance. And we know this Jet team, at times they've had trouble covering the tight end. Tyler Conklin a start for me in this one. The last 2 out of 3 weeks, he's had double-digit fantasy points in PPR leagues. And Tyler Conklin's a big body. He's got decent yard after catch ability. And he's a pretty good route runner for a tight end position. And this New York Jet team, we know they need someone else to emerge in the passing game. We know Allen Lazard's been a touchdown specialist, but in terms of running routes and being consistent in the offense, Lazard really hasn't been. Garrett Wilson's been the only player in that offense for the most part. He's been consistent, even though his numbers haven't been great, besides last week where he had 22 targets in that ball game and 13 catches over 100 yards with a touchdown. So Conklin coming off a 6 for 55. I think in this one versus Buffalo, the Jets got to exploit the middle of the field, and I think Conklin could be a decent start this week. So that's tight end start sits every matchup for week 6 of the fantasy football season.